Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Beyond the Device. My name is Reid. I'm on the line today with two fantastic human beings, Mr. Carter Dunbar, not Dunford, even though I said Dunford many times before we started doing this. Carter Dunbar, and then also Mr. Mack Bickle. Thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon, talking a little bit about identity automation, rapid identity, and what MFA is. What is it? What are we talking about today, guys, and why is it important? I will turn that over to you, Mack, for the start of this. What is identity automation? Who are you guys, and why are you important?
Thanks, Reid. Hey, and thanks for having Carter and I on today. This is great. Been looking forward to this, the monotony of this COVID pandemic. So this is a fun little change to our day.
Trying to get away from slides and voices for webinars. We know it's not very engaging. Yeah, absolutely. Get after it.
Yeah. Thanks for almost learning my name as well.
Yeah. I promise you by the time this is over, I will have your name right. I promise.
Yeah. And so identity automation, we are a full identity access and management platform. We're a software company. Our mission is to help make organizations more secure through identity-driven security.
Okay, identity-driven security. So one of our previous calls, I know that we talked a bit about, I think, Carter, it was actually you that said it. You said identity-centric security. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do you mean identity-centric security? Because I feel like maybe the perimeter has changed for what security has previously been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, specifically when we look at what a cybersecurity program is going to need to entail, it's more than just a single silver bullet that's going to take care of everything. You can't just set up a firewall and you're safe. You can't just have mobile device management and be safe. You can't have antivirus and be safe. It's all of these different things working together. However, in this new perimeterless environment that we find ourselves in, all of these different tools to be able to work together, the first thing they all start with is, who is the person that we're evaluating right now? Any decisions, any behavior, anything like that is all going to come down to first identifying who is this person. And then we can decide if what they're doing is safe or not, or if they should have access.
Gotcha. So to your point, you're the ID, your physical ID, you as a person, is the only constant really anymore in the game of mobility, right? Because that's what we all are mobile focused. We're all mobile focused in the world that we live in day to day. But really, the only constant that we have in any organization, because devices change and policies change, and promotions happen, people move up, people move out. The only real way to manage any of that is not so much the devices. It's really the actual individual, him or herself. Correct?
Absolutely.
One of the things I did want to talk about as well, because I feel like you guys are not new to this space. Matter of fact, you're like I think you're like the OG of the space, if I'm not mistaken. You're like one of the first, if not the first, specifically in healthcare. You've got some pretty amazing products as well. But can you dive a little bit into like a typical scenario of how somebody would use your product in a day-to-day?
Well, yeah, I'll start with it. Carter, you can take off after this, but I'll just talk about my own experience. I just came across my year anniversary of coming on to identity automation, and the best way to describe. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long year, a short year, all in the same. But the best way to describe this is my first day experience, or what led up to it. So, in a nutshell, we have a bring your own device. So I went out and got a computer, or took my own. And the day before I started, I got an email on my personal account from our HR department that had a code and a link to a URL that I needed to get to. The URL was just the typical identity automation one for our instance of our platform, which is called Rapid Identity. And I immediately go to this. It just looks like a single sign-on page, password, everything. It says claim account though. So I click claim account. It has me put in the code that I got in my email before, and then prompts me from there to answer 5 challenge questions and do some other things that I could set that pertain specifically to me. And after that, I had to log out and log back in. As soon as I did that with my password and set up that account, I immediately go into a portal that has tabs and tiles that you can click on. And I had email, Salesforce, benefits, you name it. All of that was there. And what was crazy is where I came from FirstNet at AT&T, and my first 2-3 weeks took me about that much time to get my right email and all of my access appropriately in that big organization. But I had everything immediately from then on. And if I needed access.
Sorry to interrupt, is that because everything is so siloed, and most companies, as they become built, they build physically in those silos too? One team handles one thing, another team handles another. And as a result, like, you might have to file or contact multiple teams in order to get turned on access for multiple things. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah, I would say so. And they're desperate systems, right? They're all over the place. They may have been using this forever. And my specific sector was the first one to use Salesforce within AT&T, which was interesting to me. So they were transitioning. So we were kind of the guinea pig in that. So it's just, it's all different systems, but having this type of system still allows for that, because the tiles are different apps, if you will, or different functionality that were specific to my role. But if I was to change roles or something, we can add those in there. We'll get into, that's kind of what we do. But the logging in part, that multi-factor authentication. So every day that I get onto my computer now, I use the app on my phone and I ping in, it sends me a push notification. So that's how I get in to all of our applications daily and access everything.
So is this just something that is just a nice to have then? It's just kind of nice to be able to log in quickly. And I'm leading you guys up because I know that this is one of the frustrations that we talk about on a regular, that this is like identity access management as a category is oftentimes looked at as a nice to have. And the way that I equate it in the conversations that I've been having is that it's very similar to saying that your keys and your locks for your doors are a nice to have. And unless you're a 7-Eleven and you're open 24 hours a day, I don't see that being a nice to have. So can we talk a little bit about that, about just that concept, that this really is a nice to have, and it just makes things super easy and smooth, but there really is a very finite reason this exists. And it's not just because of the ease of access, it's because of the security that's needed around each individual identity. Can you guys speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's been the easiest story to tell for the last 15 years, which is the easiest story to sell, which is why it's just become the narrative. Identity and access management tools focus around exactly what the question you asked. What does it look like on a day-to-day? How does a user see it and experience it? And when you think about it, it comes down to automation. So exactly what Mack was talking about, you're automatically provisioning accounts with the right access into the right applications for people. That's awesome. That means you get stuff done quicker. That's nice. Without that, you could still do it. You would just do it manually and it'd take longer. So with that, it's kind of a nice to have. Some of the other features or functionalities that are typically associated with IAM are things like self-service password reset, allowing your end users to go claim an account or to reset their own password or something like that instead of having to call the help desk. That opens up your bandwidth of what you can use your IT resources for. It saves you money. That's nice to have. All of your user experience side of it, single sign-on, these are nice to haves. However, the narrative is needing to change at this point because, as we touched on earlier, entire security programs now, because everything has become so mobile, we have to focus on the identity for your security. That's your foundation. It's the backbone of everything that your security program is going to do. Your analogy is great. It's like, you don't necessarily need a deadbolt on your door because you've got the little thing that your key goes into. You got the little knob handle. That's awesome. That's fake security. Like, that gives you something, but it's not enough, you know?
Yeah, I think those are all great points, man. I know I kind of poke and prod you guys a little bit with this one because it's something that I hear a lot about, and a couple points that you did make in there specifically about the single sign-on. Sorry, I was trying to remember the second point you're talking about. As far as that being a nice to have, it's really simple and it's quick and it's easy. However, managing a person from an identity perspective is incredibly important, especially in the case of stolen credentials. So there's something else to be said here, that it's not just about how quickly you can get into a system as that being a nice to have, but it's actually it could be a potential hazard if you're not doing this. Were there any other points, Mack? Do you want to jump in with something? I saw you about to speak there.
Well, just that, I mean, you're hitting on exactly. It's a nice to have, but it's a must have for any organization that is keeping up with what they need to do for security. I'm sure, when Palo Alto came out with their firewalls and IDS and IPS and the threat detection and everything, those are great. But what happens if someone's already in your system? What do you have when it's there, and how do you track that? I mean, a great example that I go to is last summer of 2019, I believe it was, there's a huge Capital One breach. Someone at Amazon had their identity spoofed, and they actually had access to the right information. And it was the banking information and contact information. And then all of that was leaked. And those companies have some of, if not the most intricate security systems from an infrastructure standpoint. I mean, Amazon, that's AWS, right? And they still had a breach, and it was all due to identity. And so what we're kind of seeing as a trend at the CIO, CISO level of all these large companies that are very cybersecurity centric and focused is identity of the individual is now the new perimeter. And that's where you actually need to start with your security. It's kind of like, well, you can have all the locks in your house if you want, but if someone has all the codes and they get in there, what do you have stopping them, and how do you know that? And so that's where identity and access management comes about. So when I was using my example of how I log in every day, not only is that they track that as normal. So if I'm at my house and my geolocation, my GPS is here, then that's normal. It's the time of day is normal, and they track, and you can audit all of the systems I access, everything like that. So
you're saying if you logged in, and not to give away your home address because I know you're wanted by the mob, but if you're in Boise, Idaho, which is where you're at, I'm kidding, you're not actually wanted by the mob. At least I hope not, because if you are, you're screwed. But if you log in from Boise, and then 5 minutes later you log in from, let's say, Manhattan or like Argentina or Brisbane or whatever, that would get flagged. That's clearly not you. That's been logging in, right?
Yeah, and there could be
about time travel. If you know about time travel, tell us now. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example. When I go and see you guys, I fly from Boise, and I typically either go straight to Chicago or I go to Denver, then to Chicago. Then I drive to Battle Creek, Michigan, to the headquarters. And during those breaks, I'll log in every time, and I'll have to re-authenticate and re-prove who I am, because that's what we have in play, and that makes sense to do because, as you said, I'm traveling all over the place.
Right. Can we talk about a couple other gripes? I feel like this is maybe not gripes, but common objections that some people have around this product line, not just specifically yours, but just the category as a whole. I feel like, identity access management is not a nice to have. It's very critical to make sure that your business isn't doing anything, or that you don't have any holes in your business. And there's some analogies here. We're going to talk about castles and bodies and boxing in just a minute, but specifically, one of the things that we jotted down was that rolling out an identity access management platform is actually extremely difficult. And that's another reason why a lot of companies don't want to do it. So they're like, not only is it a nice to have, but this is way, way too complicated. It takes too long, and we just don't see value in it. So can you talk a little about that? Because that isn't true. The IT side of it's actually quite simplistic.
Yeah, so before I came to Identity Automation, I actually worked as a consultant, and we would deliver identity and access management products. We were, or solutions. We were vendor agnostic, so we would come in and make recommendations based on the industry, the customer, their needs. Here's a product and a vendor that fit your needs, and we can come in and help you implement that. And in the IAM space, roughly half of the IAM projects are going to fail. And it's a very high percentage, and people associate that with, these products are too complicated, the implementation is too tough, it's just a really difficult thing. And that's not the case. Most of the reasons why an IAM project is going to fail has nothing to do with the product itself. What happens is they're viewed as IT projects and not full business projects. So identity and access management is a team sport. Like, if you want your rollout to be successful, you've got to have the C-level, the business owners, the end users, everyone aware of it and bought in from the very, very beginning. because they're going to be the ones making the decisions. And most of the complexity of these projects are going to come down to your business processes and your data. And that's something we can't help with. That's something consultants can't really help with. You know your data, you know your processes. We can help you define them, but you have to bring that expertise.
Yeah, I think that's, you know what, and it's funny too, because from the consultative perspective of why this doesn't go well so many times, well, I know that the last organization that I was at, horizontal communication was like, it was not a thing. It just didn't happen. And so a lot of times you had duplicative projects and work just because the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand. And we kind of talked about it earlier. It's when companies get built up as they grow and grow and grow, they grow in silos. It's a natural state of occurrence. It's not unusual, and it's certainly not uncommon at all. And so when rolling out a project that is around identity access management, and obviously we hope you were using identity automation for this project, but regardless, you have to make sure all the business units are in connection with each other. They're all speaking to each other. Everyone's bought in, and there is a line of sight and transparency into every single business process, or it's going to be doomed from the start. And I think a lot of times, unfairly so, organizations like yourself and others get blamed that it was too complicated of a process, but it was really the lack of a connected tissue between the groups to make sure that there wasn't a drawn out process. Can we talk about one other thing too? This is a huge gripe again for myself, that people have homegrown solutions around this. Can we talk about that and the fact that there's a reason that organizations, governments, what have you, have standardizations or certifications to be applied, that if you're applying to work with us in any, like FedRAMP, for example, if you're FedRAMP certified, it means that you are going to hit a certain check mark of certification. There's a standardization behind that, and you are good to go in this category. So can we talk a little bit about proprietary scripts and proprietary solutions and why they are so frustrating? And Carter, after you speak, maybe we can get Mack's cat on camera as well. I'm pretty sure I heard him chirping.
He's behind me. That's his photo right there. That's a little. Hey, that's a really successful cameo. His name's Leonardo DiCaprio. He's won an Oscar, as you know. So it's pretty good.
Dude, that's ridiculous. Well, that's a fantastic name, by the way. My dog's name is Carl. We're not nearly as creative as you. That was
Chicago Carl.
Carl, Instagram. There you go.
And Carter, before you jump into that, I just would like to share that this morning I'm the partner manager. So I was talking to one of our partners. We're working on a university over in Illinois area, actually. And I just heard about it on a documentary from the Michael Jordan documentary, actually. Krause went there. But anyway, we're working on this project. And earlier this year, when we were out there, we identified that they had their IT director had built their IDM, their identity access management structure, literally built it. That's homegrown as you can get. It's one guy that knows how to do it. He retired. So they have to get a new system in place now before the school year starts. And with COVID happening and this whole pandemic, yes, it was put on the back burner. And I was talking to our sales rep this morning of like, hey, I talked to our partner and yeah, it was on the back burner, but this has to happen. So we need to step on it and get going. So this happens a lot. And so I'll let Carter go into it, but it's just funny that happened this morning.
Yeah. And Reid, we can't even make this up. Like, I know you and I had this conversation a couple of days ago. Literally my call right before this one was with a university out on the West Coast who started the conversation by saying, yeah, we have our own homegrown, system that we put in place with a bunch of scripts, but then that guy left and there was no documentation. And so we don't know really what it's doing.
So the guy actually wrote his own script for it, like his own language?
No, but that has happened. So when I was a consultant previously, we went out and we were talking to a customer and they said, we're good with IAM. We have something in place. We go, oh, that's cool. What are you using? Oh, we got a guy. He's a freaking genius. He wrote his own scripts of his own scripting language and it works. And I was like, that's awesome. That's a terrible idea.
That guy's a
Like,
genius,
what
though,
happens?
just for the record,
Oh,
to be able to do that is
absolutely.
it's like freakish
Absolutely.
intelligence. But yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that guy left.
That guy left.
Okay.
And so they end up bringing us back in to come and replace it because now they had no idea how to administer it. We come in and they said, here, we'll give you all the scripts so you guys can make heads or tails of it. We took a look at it. He literally wrote his own scripting language to where it would have been better if he had written it in Klingon, because at least then there would have been some nerds on staff who actually knew Klingon and would be able to decipher that.
And by
But
the way,
this was
if you do speak Klingon, that's actually kind of impressive in my eyes. I'm just saying that's like
absolutely.
it's a made up language that is also a language, which is I think all language technically, but that one was made just for a TV show, which is still mind boggling. So this guy, he wrote his own script. No one knew what it said, and he's just like, I'm out, deuces. And then they just were like, uh-oh.
Yeah, and the actual implementation cost for them ended up doubling from what it initially was going to be, because when he was on staff, he knew all the processes. He knew the schema. He knew what data should be mapped to where and what it should be doing, what decisions should be executed on that.
Yeah,
he left. Nobody knew that. So we were like, if we got to find that out, that's going to take more of our time to consult with you to get to the bottom of your processes. So,
yeah, and I think this, yeah, it's crazy. We made a comment earlier about horizontal communication in most organizations not being very good, especially the larger you grow. It's just very difficult to do. It's never like a nefarious thing or done on purpose. It's just, it's a lot's happening, especially at the larger organizational levels. But because of this, and because of our comments earlier about things getting grown in silos, knowledge becomes very tribal. And as a result of that, when a person leaves, all the knowledge that they had goes with them. And that can be very, very damaging. And obviously, in the case that Carter was just talking about, guy left, and then they basically were completely SOL for their entire identity access management platform that has been in development. And even though if it was an amazing platform, that guy's gone. And so with his knowledge goes with him, or I should say, so his knowledge goes with him as well. One more thing to speak to, or actually, before we go on, because I want to talk a little bit about bigger picture, because we talked a little bit at the top that this is a nice to have, which it's not. It really isn't. But I also want to get into the fact that there's no silver bullets in security, and that you really do need a multi-staged approach to security. So I want to get into that a little bit. But before we move on, do you guys have any other common objections or things that you hear out there that are just patently incorrect that you want to address? No, nothing else. I wasn't sure if there was a tab of mine.
one thing that I would point out is that along the lines of the no silver bullet, there also, we want to look at IAM as a strategy. We are in the most, IAM is the most crowded space in tech right now, period, of companies. And there's so many pieces that are involved with it that
real fast to interrupt you about that, just to go back to my point about this not being a nice to have. Why do you think there's so many companies in the identity access management space? Because the people that are in the world of technology and in IT understand how incredibly important this is, and the fact that it's not a nice to have. I just wanted to make that point. There's a reason the space is very crowded, is because it's a must have technology moving forward in 2020 and beyond.
Totally. Exactly. And, you'll see from our competitors, going back to what I was saying, is that, it's a strategy, and it's not necessarily one's going to fit all of your needs exactly how. So with how crowded this space is, one of the objections that I hear, or when we're talking to, is, oh, we use Okta, or, oh, we use Ping, or we use Duo. And then I go, and what else? Because there should be they're very good at what they do and their niche in the market, but they don't necessarily do everything that involves a true full IAM platform approach. And so that's what that's an objection that I just am like, well, yeah, let's talk about it though. What are you doing? It's evolving. It's one of those things that you don't build it and set it there and let it just sit. It's a constant upkeep. You have to keep evolving with it, or just like patching your network security. Right. You have to patch, right? So it's the same type of thing. And so that's the objection that I hear. So it's always, check out everything that you have and look at the different parts. You don't necessarily, and I think going into the failures that Carter talked about, you don't necessarily have to build, if you don't have anything, you don't need to build everything all at once. You can build just a piece of it and then add another piece and do it that way and build upon your strategy.
That actually dovetails into one of my favorite expressions, which is how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. And it's true. It's a silly expression, but it's pretty spot on for, I think, how to deploy any of this larger, especially in security. There has to be a roadmap to do this. And people, and they like your organizations and others that we work with can easily help you guys lay out what that roadmap should look like. It could be a very daunting task to just see this world and try to implement it all in one shot. It's a great point. And it doesn't have to be that. It just doesn't. Yeah. This has to happen in stages. It's just like it's like any meal. It always happens, and it's like you have your appetizers and you have your main course and desserts, or in my case, like many desserts, because you have no control of your appetite or self-control of your hands. But yeah, I think it's this has to be done in stages, and it has to be done in an intelligent way that is very strategic. So yeah, we can absolutely help with that.
And it's all flavors, right? It goes into that too. It's like, what kind of elephant are you going to eat, or what part of the elephant do you like? Exactly. And so that's the other thing is, so we kind of tying it all in. We constantly work within environments that have a competitor or multiple competitors in there and are able to all work together. If you go to any of the big names out there and look at their websites on their partnerships, or if you go to their LinkedIn and quickly browse their articles, they're always promoting partnerships with their competitors or what they're doing and how they integrate. And that's just like us with our APIs. We can integrate with any of our competitors because that's needed in this space, is that you have to have the ability to work with others and play nice because it's part of the strategy. A lot of the time I like the look of this SSO better than I like the look of that SSO. So that's why I use it. That's the reason. And that's fine. But they want to have, a different multi-factor authentication to get into that SSO, things like that. So it's bits and pieces like transformers and, you got to make Voltron, right? You can make them different parts.
There's an analogy we weren't planning on talking about, was transformers. I think so. Actually, to talk about that and the various bits and pieces of the transformer, maybe we can transition into this as being where you guys are as far as the bigger picture of security. So that's another thing that we talk about a lot, especially when we speak about security, is that there is no one size fits all mentality. There's no silver bullet. I constantly am reiterating this with people, and it seems like a lot of organizations they might want to have a silver bullet because it's kind of easy and they feel like they can be done with this category. In 2020 and beyond, especially right now, with the COVID-19 stuff, the phishing scams, the stimulus was passed and the stimulus phishing scams, like it's just like the hits keep on coming and they just don't stop. And so you guys fit into a much bigger security picture. And I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and I know that we spoke a little bit earlier about, the Transformers. Actually, great. It's a great analogy because you can't have or maybe was it, I'm thinking Transformers or am I thinking about Power Rangers where each one was like a different limb?
Kind of Power Rangers. It's a knockoff of Voltron, but yeah.
Dude, don't let Saban hear that. He'll come after you, man. That's it. You're toast. Ninjas are coming. I think looking at security, we talk about. I've always maybe I should be using Power Rangers or Transformers as an analogy, but we talk about the castle as far as you have the castle walls, you have the moat, the bridge, the drawbridge, the castle gate, and the guards inside, and it's kind of similar in an approach to security within organizations. There isn't just like an archer up on the tower and then the king's like, all right, well, we're good there. We got Tim and Tim's good. He's great with an arrow. Like there's multiple things. There's always multiple things. So can we talk a little bit about maybe the way I always speak about this, like the moat and castle wall is for all incoming traffic. And we work with a company called Zix that maybe funnel that to make sure like who's coming and going should be verified before they even get there. There's like the archers on top as well, like the bridge, the like funneling everybody into a certain point of entry. It's like a net motion, which you guys work extremely well with. The drawbridge is almost like the last part of defense. It's like almost like a mobile iron or like an MDM with threat defense, like as Imperium. You can yank that bridge up if anyone has access. They shouldn't have access on there. And there's like the castle gate, which is the verification of who gets inside. That's really where I see you guys as far as being so important. It's like you guys like the last line of defense there to make sure someone isn't getting in. But even if someone does get in, there's other things too, which is a company we work with called Defend Edge, or Scion. It's a great product, SimSware UEBA. But can you guys talk a little bit about the castle analogy? Because I know that Carter, you mentioned something about how did you describe it? It was defense and something. I can't remember what you said. It was like one wall is great, defense in depth. Thank you. It's like one wall is great, so we'll build 3 more walls. And it's very important to know that the things that we're talking about are all solving not disparate, but different pieces in the overall solution. This isn't like another wall to another wall to another wall. It's all very specific for the way traffic is managed within an organization in the mobile world, with everything moving to SaaS and SD-WAN and everything else across the board, with everything going into the cloud. So you could talk a little bit about that, maybe, if I didn't already just run this analogy into the ground about the defense in depth.
Yeah, I mean, Reid, I'll turn it around back to you. So you, with your military background, you were a Marine, correct?
Correct. Yes. Operation.
So,
thank you for your service.
Whenever you would go out with your troops, with your fellow soldiers, you didn't just all go out. You weren't all scouts. You weren't all snipers. You weren't all exactly the same role. You each had different roles for your own security and protection. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you and what that makeup was?
Yeah, sure. So we had, I guess one of my common things, so everything I like defense, like a great way. What was it? Bobby Knight, the great offense is a great defense. Was that Bobby Knight? I think said it. If I'm butchering that, I think I'm doing the same thing that Dan Quayle did.
The best defense is a great offense.
Is that what it was? All right. So it's not, maybe it's not the best analogy for this, but I think a common thing that I talk about is in militaristically, like your artillery is long range. You have your snipers; those are long range as well. You've got affectionately what we call the ground pounders, which are riflemen. Those guys are either being deployed by track or usually deployed by track or in their own company. So for us, our Regimental Combat Team 5, but we followed the Abrams Tank Battalion into combat. We were a counter mech platoon, so we were all heavy weapons, Mark 19, 50 caliber machine guns, tow missiles back in the day when those were still a thing. But everybody had a different point, and artillery was always that was long range weaponry. You're never going to fire artillery up close. It's kind of the same thing with, like, in the analogy of somebody who's a sniper. If a sniper is being forced to use their pistol, something went horribly wrong. Right. And so, like, we and again, it's like that whole attack strategy. It's like everybody has a very specific point of focus on the battlefield and what they're supposed to do. It's why you have air support. It's why you have naval support. Everyone has a very specific function, and there is redundancy in that, but only to a certain extent, in that you have a specific objection that you're trying to take, or you're passing out humanitarian aid and you have to put down like a security perimeter, like those types of things. There's always a very specific role all those things take, even though there might seem like there's redundancy. There really isn't. Everybody has a very specific team function. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Put it in my own experience. So I was a college basketball player, and the concept of defense in basketball is exactly the same. You have 5 guys who are out there who have to be in communication with each other, and they all have their roles, their responsibilities, and assignments. They have to trust that each other is doing theirs. Sure, you can cover up for each other, but for the most part, you have to be 5 guys working together to actually be able to protect the basket and protect what you're trying to defend. It's the same thing when you're looking at a cybersecurity program, with the castle analogy, with your regimental approach, with a basketball team. It's got to be multiple pieces, multiple tools that are functioning with a specific role, a specific responsibility and assignment, but they have to be communicating with each other. You talked about silos earlier. You can't patchwork a security program together, have it completely isolated, and expect to be successful. And so
Right,
that's one
yeah.
of the things where, our product does a really good job of, Mack was calling them our competitors. There are companies out there that we'll compete with in one account, and then the next account we're actually partnering together. Like the tools have to be able to work together, and they have to be able to communicate. And that's something our tool is very, very flexible in being able to work with all these other aspects of security programs, like who you mentioned earlier that you guys work with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. I think, again, we're not saying that if you have one wall, you need another wall. We're not talking about defense in depth. We are trying to get each individual security measure. Each individual security measure really is a different weapon in defense. And I use the word weapon
Right.
because I really do feel like this has to be an intentional strategy of defense. It's not really defense anymore in 2020 and beyond. It really needs to be offense because there's so much coming at us all the time that I feel like your typical security that's been a defensive posture really needs to flip that on its head and offensively go after where you have potential opportunities for breach, for data exfiltration, and also too there are places here in the U.S. California is one of them. They've the GDPR regulations. If you're operating and you have your data stolen, that's a massive lawsuit, massive
Oh, yeah.
lawsuit. So we're getting past the concept of just data exfiltration for like the end consumer. This is getting into a place where there's going to start being fines for people who are not being proactively trying to fix this. Mack, I think you're going to say something. I cut you off. I saw you. So you're about to speak.
You didn't cut me off. I didn't start yet, but thank you for
Oh.
noticing. Yeah, no, it's in going along with these analogies, especially like the defense and the saying of the best defense is a great offense. Well, if we flip that around, and when we look at security, and especially when it comes to identity access and management, and if it's all flowing well, it creates opportunity for a better offense, so to speak. And what I mean by that, and a perfect example, especially in the era that we're in, we do a lot in healthcare, and it's enhanced single sign-on and identity access management. We actually just won the class identity access management leader category this 2020. But for understanding that and going back to, yeah, it is. Thank you. But our going back to the beginning of the conversation and talking about how people log in and how you do that, and Carter was talking about the data that is their data. So when it comes to healthcare in a hospital, we go in and we talk with the hospital about their workflows, their specific needs of the doctors and what nurses and what roles they have, right? And it's a very complex process, and what they have in there is extremely complex. So once we get it nailed down and we implement their solution and they're ready to go and they have their badges and they're able to tap into any shared workstation anywhere in the hospital once they're logged in and access that, what we talk to the chief nurses and CIOs about is time. And we're not talking hours, we're talking minutes, because minutes in a hospital increase the amount of time that doctors and nurses can see patients, which increases diagnosis, which increases save lives, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're doing there. So with a smooth, what did they say? Smooth is fast and fast is smooth. I don't know, it's another analogy or saying I heard recently. But in the hospitals, if they're able to have 5 more minutes, that could be a life, especially in a pandemic like this. And if some company already has it in there and their identity and access management is smooth and they're able to do this, it's just going to increase what they can do as an organization. And that's in that instance. You can take that to private sector, government, you name it. And that could be increased profitability, making more money, allowing IT folk to do IT work and not have to worry about provisioning a new user as fast. I mean, there's things that come that free up time to allow for more of an offensive approach or allocate your time elsewhere if it's implemented correctly.
Yeah, I mean, so to quote a former GM of Samsung, Kevin Gilroy, shout out to KG, wherever you are out there in the world, he always talked about value-added activity and giving time back to organizations so they can focus on value-added activity. And I think it's spot on what you just said. To give that, I mean, you don't want your IT people screwing with like little nitpicky crap that should be, easily solved, or there should be an automation in place so that way it's not a problem. You want your IT folks who you're paying money to be focused on the big problems. And especially whether it not be nitpicky, or now that you've put them in a defensive posture where they're having to react to a situation instead of proactively getting ahead of it. Now you have your IT folks screwing with stuff they shouldn't even have been messing with to begin with. And what's worst about that, the absolute worst about that, is the fact that if you're always defending, you're losing. And so, to use a boxing analogy, you have to have an active ring strategy in order to get back on offense. Otherwise, you're going to take a shot to the jaw and you're going to drop. Like, you can't just constantly be on defense. And that's what we're seeing in the market, which is so frustrating for a lot of these organizations. Security, they're just constantly on their back foot defending, which is, I think, why we're seeing so much loss out there. It's really I wish we could get a message out there to get better ahead of this, or to maybe look at where budgets should go, again, to really treat this as a must-to-have category instead of something that's looked at as just wouldn't it be great?
And I do see this. I would say it's 60% are still in that, but I'm seeing a large swing, at least with the customers that we talk to, and the more interest of this has to happen. I was at iGel's Ignite or Disrupt conference right before this happened in Nashville, and they had a prominent CFO, and then CIO for the largest hospital system in the U.S. talk about how this is something they have to do. Moving to the cloud, doing this it's a have to. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's not a maybe we'll do it. It's a have to. And hearing that was eye-opening. We're seeing some large prospective customers come to us and say, we've been behind the 8 ball. We need to do this. We just need to do it right. And so I think the tides are changing. I think this is going to be a bigger focus for cybersecurity in general when it comes to the companies out there.
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have these problems. And I think one of a lot of people's favorite expressions is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The definition of insanity. Shout out to Albert Einstein, wherever you are in the world, sir. I think he said. Didn't he say that? I think he said that.
I don't know. But I think we're on like 10 expressions. I mean, we could change this to beyond the expression.
Beyond the expression. There you go. It's no longer beyond the device. No, but I think you hit on that pretty well. And again, it's there just has to be a different approach on this moving forward, or we're going to continue to see the same problems over and over and over. It's 2020. Mobility isn't going away. Security is top of mind. It's going to you're always going to have the bad actors out there that are poking and prodding and trying to get things that they shouldn't have access to. And we just have to do a better job to make sure that they don't have access to the things they shouldn't have access to. With that, I'll bring us to closing comments. I know we've been on here for about 30 minutes or so, not to include the pre-work that we did to this. It's actually an hour and a half total. So thank you guys for your time and being able to put all this together. And hopefully it's very informative for everyone listening. But do you guys have any closing comments just at the end of this, or any other points that you want to make from just a final point you'd like to make?
No, I think just hammering back on really the thesis of all of this, which is identity and access management needs to be viewed not as a luxury item where it's just focused on the automation and the admin time that it's saving you, but it is an essential security element. And it is one component of a larger cybersecurity program, but it really is the backbone. An individual identity is the backbone of every security mechanism you can put in place. And so I think that the situation we've been dealt with COVID is really bringing that to light with all of the people who are now having to be remote workforce. In the education space, you have distance learning, you have all of this stuff, but the core of it is make sure you have the right people having the right access to the right things. And that's what IAM is.
Fantastically put. I kind of
for the right amount of time.
Oh, there you go. The right people have the right access to the right things for the right amount of time. That was the final from Mack. Dude, that was fantastic. You guys, thank you again so much for making time. Carter, Mack, you guys are fantastic. Identity automation, a wonderful organization.
I have a closing remark. Sorry.
Oh, please. No. So please go.
Well, and for who 3i works with, the partners and the resellers out there, I think, for those going in and consulting on all things security to their customers. I think, as we discussed, asking what they're doing from an inside out perspective. So starting with the identity of a person and then working their ways out, which to me would be out to the firewalls and things like that. It's always been from the outside in. You start asking them what they're doing from the inside out, I think that you'll drive more value to your customer, because if you look at it both ways, then they'll have all their bases covered. It's not one size fits all, like we said. So you got to look at it from many different perspectives. And I think that's a unique question. We've been on enough calls that if you ask what they're doing from the inside out and you see them pause for a second, you can tell that they probably haven't looked at it that direction or from that perspective, and really get things going in their mind.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you again so much. Carter Dunbar, not Dunford. You know what it is? Actually, I know why I keep saying Dunford. Colonel Dunford, shout out to wherever you are, sir. Now General Dunford, awesome guy who was in charge of us during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Regimental Combat Team 5. Colonel Dunford, at the time, Colonel Dunford, was an amazing guy. And I think I for some reason jammed Dunford in those two things together. Anyway, Carter Dunbar, thank you so much for your time. Mack Bickle, thank you so much for your time. Identity Automation, amazing organization, amazing product, Rapid Identity and MFA. Hope you guys learned something. I know I always do when I'm with you. And thank you so much for tuning in, either watching or listening. And we'll see you next time on the internet. Cheers.